Station.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna give 5 more minutes for people to join.
It's fine. Yeah, usually I,
Um, Luis Guajardo, he's one of my go-to loan officers that I talked to him yesterday or probably in the morning. I told him, hey, you want to join? And he's like, yeah, of course. All knowledge is good. So,
that's a
and
good
also,
attitude.
yeah. And also I talked to loan officers. It's like, do you guys actually tell your clients about this? They're like, no, we just lend money. I'm like, okay.
It's just good for business,
Yeah,
being knowledgeable and being able to pass that on to your clients.
absolutely.
And I'll have some papers for you at the end, everybody,
Okay.
so that you'll be able to look up some information yourself. And our website, which I'll tell you about in the end as well, has answers a lot of questions right there.
Okay.
Have you seen it yourself, Alberto?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. It just
Okay,
I never took your class though, your C where more
right.
information is is
Hmm.
is given to us. I just took probably the same class, the basics of FIRPTA. I do have a basic good understanding of what it is, and I've had clients that have dealt with it, but I always refer them to their CPAs or whatever is in charge. But I never really had somebody that specializes like you about this, so it will be a lot easier. Like, look, these are the basics. This information that was created by somebody that's professional. Reach out to them. I don't know what they're charging to that, but it's like a seller disclosure. It might not be the reason you're gonna get sued, but might be the reason to get sued. So just do it.
Okay. I'm seeing the word share down here, so I'm crossing my fingers because usually I set this up as
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
host, but
Yeah,
I
you
think,
should you should have no problem.
okay, I think the hostess or the, if you've made me like
Co-host.
a co-host, that I should be able to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, you should. If not, I'll switch to you being the host, but you shouldn't have a problem.
Okay. And all of you hear me?
Yeah, that's a good test. If you are connecting from your cell phone, whatever, just give us a thumbs up. I know Luis, Selena,
I can hear
I'm
you.
assuming. Yeah,
Okay,
Maury.
thanks.
I can hear you.
Good, good. I guess the ones that can't don't know what I'm asking. Okay.
Yeah. They're like, can you hear me? Cool. Probably there's only one or two more
Okay.
that told me that they will join. 2 more minutes. So how long have you done this? The
Oh,
FIRPTA Solutions.
um, this this is going on my fourth year, I think it
Okay.
is. But I've done over 250 of these presentations. So
Okay.
I was just going to say, that if anybody has questions and you interrupt me, I mean, usually I have them answered by the end of the presentation,
Uh-huh.
but interruptions don't bother me because I've done this enough times that I usually get right back on track again. So
Yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah.
hesitate if you have any
Um,
questions.
but what about like are you a part of the team that is advising the client, or is that somebody else within FIRPTA Solutions?
You mean who's our clients?
No, no, no. Like for example, if I refer you a client, would you
Mhm.
take care of them, or is somebody else that will be taking care of them, like talking to them, etc.?
I'm the education director. So
Okay,
this is what I do. I do the
okay,
presentations and I teach the classes on it as well.
okay,
We have a whole staff at our main office, which is in Cape Coral, and some affiliate staff in other states as well. And they're the processors.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
they are and we have CPAs and we have a lawyer as well on staff for hard case resolutions. So we have a lot of experts on staff that can answer your questions. In fact, if you ask me very detailed questions about a specific case, I'll refer you to the office.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank
Because
you.
what we're going to do is a broad brush. And even in the class, which I'll tell all of you about the class shortly.
Yes.
But even in the class, as in depth as we go, we still don't cover the details of your specific situation. And I'll always refer you back to the office, either email them or call them directly. The initial consultations are free. If you have a question and say, I have this client who this, and this, then they'll ask you questions like, do they need an ITIN number? Do they have this? Do they have that? Series of questions specific to your client.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to help you with it. And then you can refer your client totally, like go there, they'll take care of you. Or we can come to closing with you and handle the FIRPTA in that way as well. So depending on your situation and your client and how you want to handle it, we work with you and
That's
support
great.
you.
Awesome. Well, if you want to start, let's start. We'll give them 5 minutes. Probably somebody else will be joining, but I'll be in the lookout for whoever wants to join.
Okay.
But if you want to start, let's go.
Yes, let me get my screen up here. I better get
There
some
you go.
glasses on here so I see what I'm doing. There we go. Okay, everybody can see that?
I can. If you
Okay,
guys can put in the chat just a thumbs up or yes or nay.
okay. Well, nobody likes to have a showdown with the IRS. And so one of the things that I'm going to do here today is to give you enough information so that hopefully that'll never happen to you. But we at FIRPTA Solutions, which is the name of my company, we're finding that we were fixing more FIRPTA situations to keep people out of trouble than just starting from scratch. So we decided to have these education courses, and that way we would, whenever you had a foreign seller that was selling U.S. property, by the time you got to closing, you would have all your ducks in a row. And so I have two goals today. And the first is to acquaint you with FIRPTA, although some of you, I know like Alberto already knows something about it, but this will give you a broad view concerning the requirements of FIRPTA. And if you were listening to us talking earlier, I also teach a more in-depth class, and you can earn 2 CE credits in certain states. We're certified in 7 different states, and Texas is one of them where you can get 2 CE credits. And I will tell you more about that later. But the second thing is I want to tell you about our company, FIRPTA Solutions. So as we're going through this, I'll mention some things that our company does because we are the experts in FIRPTA and are here to support you. So what is FIRPTA and why is it important? Well, I'm an instructor. In fact, I teach college courses as well as working with various companies. And I always try to simplify the material to make it in a teachable format. But let me tell you, it was a real challenge with FIRPTA because FIRPTA has some quirks in it that make it complicated. But as we go on, I'll try to keep it simple. Another reason it's important is, as you know, foreigners are coming to this country in record numbers and buying property here. So I think the last figure I heard was something like $45 billion in residential real estate. So it's a really lucrative part of your market, our market. So I want to take the fear away from FIRPTA so that you can participate in this opportunity and maybe alleviate some of your reservations that you might have in dealing with foreign individuals. FIRPTA is an acronym, and it stands for Foreign Investment of Real Property Tax Act, and it's designed to ensure that foreign owners of U.S. property pay their share of taxes on the profit or gain when they sell. But, and you know what happens when you make a profit here in the U.S., what happens? You pay taxes on it. But what we were finding is that, not what we were finding, what the IRS was finding, that oftentimes foreign individuals would sell their property and then go back to their country. And when it came to filing their taxes, they were nowhere to be found. So FIRPTA kind of levels the playing field so that everybody pays taxes when they make a profit. Well, initially, it's not based on the profit. FIRPTA is actually 15% of the selling price, or thereabouts, 15% of the selling price, which is a pretty big chunk of change. But what the government does is they take this withholding tax, and it's kept safely in the hands of the IRS. And then whenever the individual files their taxes, it's based on the profit. So initially it's not based on the profit, but when they file, it's based on the profit. And because it's such a large amount, there's a really good chance that they'll have a refund. So it's a tax, but it's not the kind of tax you're familiar with. It's a withholding. And just to reiterate, it's estimated at about 15%. It's temporary and it's set aside for a future tax payment and very possibly refundable. So who is subject to FIRPTA? Does anybody know who the main player is in FIRPTA?
The buyer.
Actually, the buyer and the seller, both are. And you may think it's one or the other, but both have a job to do. There are actually two parties involved in FIRPTA, and the seller is the first party that we're going to be talking about. And the seller is defined as a foreign seller is anyone who's not a U.S. citizen or not a resident alien, and they're selling U.S. property. Okay, this is the one that you need to look at. If the seller is foreign, FIRPTA comes into play. If the seller is foreign. If the buyer is foreign, it doesn't matter. It's the seller that's going to pay the tax, and FIRPTA is a withholding tax. So it's the seller that determines if FIRPTA happens or not. Once again, a foreign seller is not a U.S. citizen, and you know what that is, or a resident alien. So let's take a look at what a resident alien is. A resident alien is a foreign individual who's not a citizen, but considered a resident living here, alien, and not subject to FIRPTA. Well, how do you determine that? There are two tests to confirm that. The first one is a really easy one, and that's the green card test. If your client, if your seller has a green card and they're foreign, but they have a green card, then you don't have to worry about FIRPTA. That gets you off the hook right away. The other one is not so easy. And there it is. They can be considered a resident alien if they have a green card. The next one is the substantial presence test. It's more complicated. In fact, hang in there because there's math coming up. The bottom line, and if you think of substantial presence, it's present in the U.S. The bottom line is that if they've been present in the U.S. for 183 days, this year and the 2 years prior, then they may pass the substantial presence test and be not subject to FIRPTA. But like I said, it's a little bit more complicated than that. With that 183 days, it's 100% of the days in the current year, a third of the days in the year prior, 2024, and a sixth of the days in 2023. So in that 3-year period, basically it's 183 days. But like I said, there's an algorithm that goes with it, and we can help you to figure that out. But here's the important part for you right off the bat. They must be present in the US for at least 31 days in the current year. So if you are selling a property on January 5th, it doesn't matter if they've been here for 20 years. They've only been here 5 years, 5 days in the current year. So move your closing back into February in order to meet that qualification of 31 days. I have a little story to tell you, and when I do the class, I tell some of these same stories because they're just good illustrations. And there was a gentleman named Hector, and this is a true story. All these stories happened in our business. And a title agent, of course. In fact, I was doing one of these presentations, and Kelsey, a little bit later, called, and she was the agent, and she said her client was Hector, and he wanted to sell his Texas home. Oh, he was in Texas too. I forgot about that. And here's his story. He's self-employed here in the US. He has an I-10 number. Do you all know what an I-10 number is? It's an individual tax number.
Yes.
He has his I-10 number, but he's originally from Mexico. And like I said, he wanted to sell his property, and he had 3 pieces of advice, and she didn't know which was accurate. He was told by someone that because he was in the process of legal residency, they could withhold 30% of the sale price. Ay, 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 30%. Can you imagine? That wasn't true, but somebody told him that. And he said, I'm not even going to sell if if they're going to be holding that much. And then a Remax agent, and this is nothing against Remax because this is complicated, told him that if he bought the home with an I-10 number, they would take 20%. Also not true. Also not true at all. Well, listen to this one. He was told by an IRS representative, that because he was because he had an I-10 number, it was like him having legal residency. And that was not true at all. I mean, he could get in really big trouble by doing that. But remember, Hector is trying to figure out the substantial presence test, and if he meets that, and therefore not subject to FIRPTA. So here's a little bit more information about him. He's been living in the US for 25 years, since he was 28 years old, and he is self-employed. He pays taxes through his tax ID, so he's not trying to avoid paying taxes. He is in the process of getting legal residency, and it's also past January January 31st. So he has been here 31 days in the current year. What we said to him is he definitely passes the substantial presence test. I mean, he's been living here unconditionally, and he's, since he was 28 years old. So for tax purposes, he's considered a US resident and therefore not subject to FIRPTA. Well, as you'll find out in a little bit, the buyer is the one that gets in trouble, even though the buyer is not the one paying the taxes. So what we had Hector do was sign an affidavit of non-foreign status. And this is an important document that you should consider for your foreign sellers who are claiming that FIRPTA does not apply to them, excuse me, it's under the penalty of perjury. And Hector signed it saying, he has been in the US for 183 days and, excuse me, and not subject to FIRPTA. Get a drink for a second, excuse me. This is tea. Here we go. Okay. There's also another certificate called the CPA certification, and it's very thorough, checking their background, checking Homeland Security travel documents to ensure that they've been in the country for that 183 days during that 3-year period. And the CPA certification checks receipts and so forth, just to ensure that it is accurate. Well, should you avoid foreign sellers? Actually, that's not a good idea, because one of the reasons, and there's so many foreign sellers in the country now and more numerous than ever. And Alberto, you mentioned that you're running into that more and more as well.
That is correct.
So if you avoid it, you're missing out on a really lucrative part of your market. But as long as you know where to go for support, you don't have to be afraid of working with foreign sellers. And there's also the possibility that you might be blindsided, because if you work with multiple sellers, one of them may be foreign. So FIRPTA comes into play there as well. Who are these foreign sellers? Well, they can be individuals, and that's what we've mostly been talking about. They can be foreign-owned corporations that are selling the property, some LLCs, and some trusts. And when I teach the class, I go into detail on each of these. But for our purposes here today, we're, just be aware that foreign sellers can come in different entities as well. And you may say, well, I represent the buyer. I'm not representing the seller. Well, the buyer has a very crucial role in the transaction. And this is the second party, the buyer. And over again, you're going to hear me say the buyer doesn't pay the tax. It's the seller, because the seller is making the profit. But the buyer has a crucial role. Who is the buyer? And this is how it's defined. Anyone who purchases a property from a non-citizen or non-resident alien. And whoops, let me jump back for a second here, because I want to warn you about something. This next sentence that I'm going to put up here is the one that makes FIRPTA so confusing. So hang in there with me, because I'll be explaining it over and over again. The buyer must hold back up to 15% of the selling price and submit it to the IRS. Once again, the buyer is not paying the tax, but when the buyer is paying the seller, the buyer holds back about 15% of that selling price and then submits it to the IRS, mails it to the IRS, FedExes it to the IRS. It's not the buyer's money, it's the seller's money that the buyer is withholding and sending to the IRS. Do you have any idea why the IRS put the buyer in charge of mailing it?
Accountability. Otherwise, who would do it?
Absolutely right. Because, yep, the seller can go back to Germany or wherever they're from. But the buyer is either still here Or if the buyer is not still here, the property is here. So if the IRS doesn't get that tax money, they can confiscate the property, and they have. Or they charge the buyer for the tax. So therefore, they put the buyer in charge of making sure that it's sent. So if you're representing the buyer, make sure that this FIRPTA tax is withheld and that your buyer mails it in, FedExes it in, gets it to the IRS, because they're the ones that get in trouble. Once again, they don't pay it, but they submit it.
Do you have a story where like actually the buyer has gotten in trouble where like the IRS maybe put a lien on the property or actually asked for the money or went through a bank account and asked for that money?
We definitely have a number of stories that go along with that. The IRS is serious about this. They're serious about it, and they don't care whose fault it is. If the money is not sent in, then they go back to the buyer. And like I said, they have confiscated the property. The worst case scenario I've heard is that they garnish the wages of the buyer for that amount of money. So as you can see, they're serious about it. Okay, well, the buyer has some other responsibilities too. And here are a few of them. The buyer is the one that's responsible for determining if the seller is foreign. So whenever you are representing the buyer, make sure that the seller is not foreign, is either a citizen or a resident alien. Otherwise, FIRPTA does come into play. Determine how much to withhold, and usually it's 15%. I'm going to show you some exceptions in a few minutes, though. Determine if there it is. Determine if there are any exceptions, and I'm going to show you a few. Determine the deadline for submitting the withholding, and this is really important. The deadline for submitting it is 20 days after the closing. So 20 days after the closing, your buyer has to take that FIRPTA tax and get it mailed in to the IRS. Okay? But there are...
Sorry to interrupt. I was told that it was done by the tele company. So that's another misconception. The buyer has to mail it, or how does that work in the actual scenario?
Yes, oftentimes the title company takes care of this. But if you're representing the buyer, then check with the title company and say, don't wait to 20 days, like within a day or two. Was the FIRPTA money sent in? Could I have a receipt? Could I have the mailing label that shows when it was sent in? So you're working on behalf of the buyer, then work for the buyer and make sure this was handled. And that's a good question and a good comment, because oftentimes it is somebody other than you as the real estate agent that is sending it in, but just make sure it's done. That's the important part. Okay, I had told you that there are some exceptions, and these are the top 3 most common exceptions. And the first one is if the seller proves that they're non-foreign. And we always tell people to assume that the seller is foreign and have them prove that otherwise by showing you some identification. I mean, it can be part of your process. One of the things that they can do is sign that affidavit of non-foreign status, and that is under the penalty of perjury. So it puts it on the seller. You know, they're the ones that are proving that they're not foreign if they want to get out of paying it. The second one, and this is a common exception, is the plan to reside. If the buyer is planning on if the property is less than $300,000 and the buyer is planning to reside there for at least 50% of the time that it's used as a residence, then the seller is exempt from FIRPTA, from paying it, and the buyer does not have to submit it. For everybody's protection, have the buyer sign an affidavit saying, yes, I plan on living here for the next 2 years. And that way, if they get sick or have to sell before that time period is over, then they'll have signed something. This was our original intent. And once again, if it's under $300,000 and it's not going to be a rental property, the buyers are actually going to live there. And if it's under $1 million, instead of 15%, it reduces to 10%. Okay. There is something called a withholding certificate, and it's if the profit is less than 15%, then they can apply for a withholding certificate. It has to be applied for to the IRS, and it used to come in within 90 days. However, since COVID, it is taking forever. So if you come into our office, we'll suggest to you not to get the withholding certificate. Just go ahead, pay the FIRPTA withholding, file your taxes, and it'll be based on your profit at that time and get your money back. Because sometimes we've been finding since COVID that it goes way after the time to file taxes. And there you are still waiting for your money or waiting for the application to be approved. And you could have already had your money back by filing your taxes. So I still mention this because it's possible and some people still want to go ahead with it. But nonetheless, that's that one. And there are other exceptions, but once again, if you call our office, we can take it by a case by case and figure out exactly what FIRPTA is and help you with it. We're just a phone call or an email away. Okay, this is the closing document. I'm sure you recognize that. And this is the seller's document. And if you notice, $52,000 was withheld. It wasn't given to the seller, but instead, the buyer takes this money, gets this form filled out, sends this form with the seller's money to the IRS. And then the seller will eventually get a certificate saying, we got your FIRPTA money. And then when they file their taxes, when the seller files the taxes, they can show that certificate to get some of their money back from the tax. Okay? This is the form that we use and can help you to fill out to send, if you're representing the buyer, to send the seller's money into the IRS. Is FIRPTA really a big deal? Well, the IRS thinks it's a big deal. I have a story about this one to tell you. If you look back here, the buyer came into our office to have this filled out. We had the seller's money. We were getting it all ready to fill out. And our buyer did not want to disclose her Social Security number, which is somewhat understandable. Sometimes, well, there are scams and things out, but this is a government paper and is going into the government as well. So we said, you have to get this in. We only have 20 days to get this in. We have the money. We have the forms filled out. We need your Social Security number so we can get this sent in. We have to get this in. Well, finally, she agreed. And it was day 21. And she got a bill for $2,700 for being 1 day late. sending it in. So is it a big deal to the IRS? Yes, it is. And here are some of the penalties. There's the buyer's liability. If the buyer fails to withhold it and send it in, there's the failure to pay, the withholding amount, the 15%, let's say, times 0.50%, failure to file, times the number of months late. And I do have a story to share with you on this. And there's interest on the original amount and interest on the penalty amount as well. So, like I said, they do not mess around at all. Nope, let me go back here. The buyer, once again, is the withholding agent. The buyer is the one left holding the bag. And like I said, in severe cases, the IRS can confiscate the property or even garnish the wages of the buyer, even though they're not the one paying the tax, because they're in charge of submitting it. And I have a story to tell you. And if you take my class, I'm going to repeat this story because it's so, it broke my heart. And once again, we were doing something like this. And Jennifer was the realtor. And she said, I have a question for you. And she said, Jennifer and her title company represented a buyer. Now, she was the real estate agent. They represented a buyer who purchased a property from a foreign seller. The seller had his attorney handle FIRPTA, which is fine. Well, the buyer is the one that's in charge. So the buyer received a letter from the IRS saying that money was owed. Not that FIRPTA wasn't sent, but it wasn't sent in a timely manner. And the buyer was charged $40,000. This was it'll be a year ago, March, that this happened. What happened was the seller's attorney was unfamiliar with all the ins and outs of FIRPTA and held the money longer than he should have. And she said, is there anything that we can do? Well, unfortunately, the buyer has a big problem because the IRS doesn't really care whose fault it is. They just care that they didn't receive the money in time. And with all different groups involved, sometimes mistakes happen. So, and this is very time sensitive, and the buyer is taking the fall for it. We do have hard case resolution, but the bottom line here is the IRS gets to call the shots. They can decide whether to do it or not. I mean, because in some cases, it's the IRS's fault. In this particular instance, it is not the IRS's fault. So they can decide whether, it's up to their discretion whether or not they do it. And when we do hard case resolution, it is time consuming. We have to make appointments, the IRS, have copies of all the documents and so forth. So I'm not saying this to scare you, because all you have to do
She
and make
froze.
sure that it has been done.
Can you
Okay.
repeat that? You froze for a little.
Repeat what?
The last part. All you have to do is what?
It is to be sure that the money has been sent in by who's ever in charge of sending it in. Get documentation, ask for a copy of the check, ask for a copy of the mailing, the receipt from FedEx or wherever it was mailed in, so that the problem and it goes back to the buyer, you have proof. And in that case, it would be the IRS's fault and not yours. Okay. We have a lot of resources at our company to help you with FIRPTA. We can apply for I-10 numbers because your seller eventually needs an ITIN number, a tax identification number, in order to apply for a refund. When we send the 8288 in, if the buyer is foreign, and they will need an ITIN number as well. And if they don't have it at that time, we can put that it's being sent for. So then whenever we have it, it'll be attached to it. We can do those withholding certificates, but as I told you, we've not been doing them since COVID, or not advising them. We can help you to find exceptions if there are. Education courses, and that's what I do. And this is a real basic one. I also do continuing ed classes, and I'm certified in 7 states so that you can get CE credits. Texas is one of them. I hold 1 class a month, and the next one is the 25th of February, which is coming up very shortly. It's Tuesday. But I have this to tell you. It's $15 a person right now. And that will end on the 28th of February. So if you take my class in March, it'll be $50 a person. So if you can do the one, if you're interested and want to do the one on the 25th, I'll tell you how you can join us for that class and get your 2 CE credits. And I'll tell you more about that in a couple minutes, but let me continue here. We can correspond with the IRS. So if you have a problem or have a question, we do know who to call there at the IRS and we do call them as well. And there are new ones out there too, like that gave the bad information to Hector, for one thing, because there are new ones. In fact, one of our people called to get some clarification on something, and the IRS agent had never heard of it. Never heard of FIRPTA. I mean, they take care of a lot of, this is not an important thing for them. I mean, it is if you don't pay it, but they have other fish to fry, and this is not one of the main ones that the IRS handles. We can file foreign taxes for any foreign individual. Our end of the line guy is Ricky, and he helps your clients to file their taxes if he's an expert on foreign tax returns. We do hard case resolution. We have a lawyer on board as well. And a lot of other things. And I'll have my phone number for you at the end here. I won't be the one that you'll be talking to, like Alberto and I were talking. I'm the one that does this, just what I'm doing. But we have experts there who I call and say, oh, somebody asked me this question, and I'm not sure how to answer it. And they help me too. Okay, have some presents for you. And you can take a picture of this page if you want, but our website is FIRPTASolutions.com. FIRPTA Solutions, plural, all one word, .com. If you go to the Education tab and go down here, you'll see Download Your FIRPTA ebook. And it looks like this, and there's a password to get into it. The password is FS for FIRPTA Solutions, FS ebook. It is not case sensitive. I just wrote it like this to make it easier to see. You can't print it, but you can go here as often as you want, and it answers a lot of the questions that I've talked about today. And it's really a good resource for you. But I do have something that you can download. And I'm going to come back to this page in a second. But if you, and you're gonna love me. People love me for this one. If you go to FIRPTASolutions.com, here's the tabs. If you go to this FIRPTA Tips, okay, it's right here, FIRPTA Tips, you'll see this document called FIRPTA Need to Know. And you're gonna love this. It looks something like this. It's a heads up for your seller, it's a heads up for your buyer, it's a heads up for you. The seller is required to have a tax ID. The seller may be asked to sign that certificate. The buyer may ask for proof. The buyer, look at this one, may ask for a copy of the shipping label, proving that that form was sent in. So it actually doesn't look exactly like this. It says this, but I had my marketing person do it in black and white like this. Oop, there you go. So that you wouldn't use all your ink up whenever you made a copy of it. So, but it says the exact same thing that's on this slide. And like I said, you can make as many copies of that as you want. If you have a foreign individual that's involved in your transaction, this is a good heads up. Okay, let me get back here again. So here it is again. Go to FIRPTASolutions.com. The education tab has the book. The tips tab has this needs to know. Okay. If you are interested in taking my class, like I said, I'll do one a month. But here's where you sign up for it. Go to FIRPTASolutions.com. Here it is. It's right here. FIRPTA 101 Continuing Ed class. 2 CE credits may be available because they're only available in 7 states so far, but yours is one of them. So, and like I said, it's only $15 right now. And there's a form on there to sign up for it. Okay. A couple more things and then I'll come back to this page. But here is the phone number of our office. And like I said, if you want to take a picture of this page, that would be great. Our email info@FIRPTASolutions.com. I am Rosalie at FIRPTASolutions.com. So if you need anything from me, you're welcome to, but mostly I would probably refer you to the office. We also have a bunch of information for you on our website, FIRPTASolutions.com. There are blog posts on different subjects that deal with FIRPTA, frequently asked questions. You may have your question answered right there. There are also videos that can answer some of your questions in kind of a fun and unique kind of way that's available there as well. And they're on YouTube, but you can get to them from our website. Hours of FIRPTA explained in a few minutes. We're also on social media. And the nice part about being friends with us on social media is we keep you updated if there are any changes or any, additional things that you need to be concerned about. So finally, does anybody have any questions that I can answer at this time? I know I've given you a lot of material.
Yeah. But no, actually, that's the reason I wanted to host, kind of like co-host this Zoom, because, this information is important. And I literally just learned a couple of things that I didn't know, right? As far as like affidavits or et cetera. So it's pretty cool to keep learning, because advising as a real estate agent is the most important part. And not necessarily advising because I'm originating the information, but be the source of the source and you're the professional. So this is important. And also because obviously I saw the website and I saw the videos and the value that you guys are providing. So that's why I reached out to you. So I appreciate you, the presentation. And also, I'm gonna be taking. Remember, I told you I'm gonna be taking that CE class, because I believe it's important. First you earn and then you remove the. First you learn and then you remove the L. So that's important. I want to start with the question, and one of the question I saw at the end that the buyer has to have a tax ID, and me being my niche to be for nationals. Most of this for nationals, on the lending side, they can buy property with having a really a tax ID, like you just based on their income in Mexico or whoever they're from, they can buy a property here in the US. But if it happens in a situation where the seller is also for national and you're for national, do you really have to have that tax ID as a buyer to submit that paperwork, or you don't really have to if you don't have one?
Um, I will make sure about this one, but as I understand it, if they do not have one, it can be sent in with the word pending there because the buyer is the one that sends the Form 8288 in. And there is a spot on the 8288 for their tax identification number. And as I understand it, whenever they don't, then we encourage them to apply for it so that we can write the word pending on there and get that sent in on time.
Yeah, because
Okay.
literally, tons of people are buying properties in the U.S. again, and if it happens that the seller is also for national, it's like, oh, I don't have a taxi, I didn't want to, I didn't mean to, etc. So one of the
Right.
advice that I tell the buyers is like, just get an ITIN, get an LLC, protect yourself. You just don't go and buy it yourself, even though you're allowed to. But every situation is different. But at the end, you just get educated, get tax ID, so you can, if maybe it's gonna even help you later on creating an LC and get deductions of what I treat as a business. It's not just I just want to buy a house in the US.
Right.
Treat it as a
Well,
business.
if they're not buying from a foreign individual, then they don't need it at that point. But like you said, you encourage them to do it. Um,
Now I have another question before I go to somebody else. Um, People are creating companies, right? An LLC. They are buying properties in the US. But what happens? They will get an employer identification number, so they will have some type of a number to do those taxes. Are they still consider uh, or apply FIRPTA to them, or just by having an employer identification number, they're not considered, they're not gonna be held, even though the ownership of that LLC they are for nationals?
And I'll go over that in the class, but there are
Okay.
some LLCs that have to pay FIRPTA and other ones pay their taxes in a different format.
Okay. Yeah, that's a
So
good
it,
one.
it just depends on how it's set up.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody
And
else have any questions? Because I keep asking questions, but because I'm gonna take it a class, I'm gonna just write it down, and that's where
that's
we're
fine.
gonna expand.
That's fine. But
Anybody else has any other questions?
yeah, sometimes it's a benefit to have an LLC and a tax person, and that's what we are, can help you to figure out which benefits you the most, whether to form an LLC and pay in that format or just to pay the withholding, the FERPTA withholding.
Now, the services, just like for example, most of the people they do have a CPA already, right? They come in the ASA or they refer them somebody. They already have say they have a CPA, right?
Yes.
How much you guys charge, if you can say, just by advising this FIRPTA process without really having to engage into, okay, now I can be your tax advisor or a CPA, etc. Just by this process, documentation only.
Okay. And I'm not trying to be evasive here, but it depends on your situation and what is needed. If you call and say, I have this client, then we'll ask you a series of questions. Do they have an ITIN number? Uh, there's just a series of questions about the property and so forth, the price of the property and so forth. Before you purchase anything from us, you'll know what you need and what it'll cost you. Because we will say to you, you need this documentation, you need this, and then you'll have the prices of those. So it's very individual, depending on what they need.
I
And
have
like I said, I'm not trying to be
No,
evasive.
that's fine, and it's a logical question, like case on case
Mhm.
basis. It's not the same somebody, an individual that is, having two, three properties. I mean, I understand.
Yeah, it just depends.
Yeah.
I have a question. If an individual purchase a home with a physical number, like own number, but they want to change it to an LLC, did you help them to do the LLC with the correct specification that they can use this for the FIRPTA benefits, like they don't have to pay that amount?
Yeah, with an LLC,
Mhm.
it depends on how it's set up. Some LLCs still pay the withholding, but there are other ones that are set up in a different format that still pay taxes, but it's just done in a different format. So the best thing to do is to call the office or have your client call the office there and talk with our accountants and find out which would be the most beneficial to them.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm. And Art, I left the screen up so that you can have, excuse me, the information, the number and everything.
Anybody else have any questions? Veronica, Benny, Selena, Claudia, Mauri? I know you guys work with a lot of our nationals too.
I do have a quick question. And maybe this is I don't know if maybe I missed it and it was addressed because I heard you briefly talking about it, but when it comes to like the title company, is there like a preferred title company or like or is it just really like how can I know what should I ask a title company that I'm working with to make sure that they know are familiar with FIRPTA and kind of how to handle it?
If you have a foreign seller, just ask them, are you familiar with FIRPTA? And, how does your company handle it? If you're using a title company who isn't familiar with FIRPTA, you can also hire our company to handle the FIRPTA part of it for you. Or the title companies, they often hire us to do their FIRPTA work for them. So, just ask them if they're familiar with it.
What
Got it.
happened to
Thank
me
you.
once, what happened to me once is the title company, in this case, the escrow officer, raised a flag and said, hey, we have to do this FIRPTA thing. But they were really meticulous about advising. They said, yes, it has to be filed, but we can do it, but we don't want to be really responsible for it. So we advise you to get a CPA. We're not going to give you the 8288. We're not going to give you the affidavits. We're not going to prepare anything. Like you as a seller, you talk to a CPA, you talk to somebody, we'll file it for you. We'll do whatever we're supposed to do, but we're not going to give you an advice on how to do it. Paperwork, affidavit, we're not going to write anything up. We're just giving title to the property, title insurance. We're going to do the escrow, where you do everything. But as far as advising, just tell us, give us whatever you need us to file, and we send it to them. So it was kind of tricky because they just don't want to get in the middle of failing to file the proper paperwork, the proper wording, the proper, maybe a comma was missed, and then they're gonna be liable for that. So that's what my experience is.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense. But you work hand in hand with the title company. So I could say, okay, we're gonna hire FIRPTA Solutions and they're gonna handle that portion, and then you'll just be in charge of making sure that the documents are signed at closing, and then sent back to FIRPTA Solutions or whatever that is that needs to happen.
Yeah, I believe that's the best course of action, though.
Mostly the sellers are referred to us. If the title company doesn't want to handle it at all, they'll refer the seller to us and say, you need to get this piece together before we get to closing. And we do go to closing with you as well. So so we can handle that part of it. When the money is dispersed, it is dispersed to us so that we can send it in on behalf of the buyer.
And another one that I did is the CPA advised the seller to apply for an ITIN instead of an LLC or whatever. So, but that ITIN took almost 9 months to get processed for whatever reason. So, I don't know. Don't kill the messenger. That's what happened. And obviously the sellers were furious because it's like, hey, we want to do the file our taxes or but they couldn't get their money back. So literally almost a year they got it back. But it took them a long time based on the advice of a CPA that was the best course of action. So I was not obviously involved. I'm just giving you the experience of if you didn't do it right with the right people, you might get a lot of delays and potentially not even your money back or etc. That's the reason I'm talking to you guys, because I don't want to be in the middle. I just want to be the source of this important information.
That's good. Yeah, as soon as you find out that there is a foreign individual involved, it is good advice to go ahead and apply for that ITIN number and get moving on that piece of it. So,
Anybody else has any other questions before I let you go? Luis? Selena? Carlos, Claudia just text that it's all good, that she'll be taking the class. Thank you very much for information.
okay.
Nope, all
And
good.
and
Veronica's good.
don't hesitate to call us or email or even me if you want to, and I'll refer you to the right person. But it's hard to get excited about paying taxes. That's not why you got in the business, for sure. But when it boils down to really helping people to just keep in compliance and stay out of trouble and make some money in the process, then it's well worth it.
Yeah. And like
Yeah.
how we started this Zoom is incredible. I was talking to, again, I'm going to repeat it that everybody's here. I was talking to a guy at the gym today and I was like, hey, do you want to join a class? It's about FIRPTA. And he had no idea what it was. And he's been living here in the States for 10 years. It's like, what's FIRPTA? It's like, did you buy a home? Yes. It's like, well, you need to know because you're from Mexico. You really need to know. So obviously he is like, I can't, but I need to know more information about it. So as agents, as lenders, we do need to know better and need to tell the people what's the right path and connect them with the right people.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Rosalie. Thank you, everybody that joined. I appreciate you. I put this together like in a week, but I think it was worth it. So I'll send an email with all the information. Well, Rosalie will send me an email and I'll forward it to everybody and also share their emails to you, Rosalie.
Okay. Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.